There's one thing everyone fears: the silence of the late night. When the world is asleep and all that remains is the sound of the wind and your own heartbeat. But for some people, that night wasn't just silence, it was the beginning of a real nightmare. These are true horror stories about people who were completely alone at night. Each story unfolds under the weight of darkness when there's no one left to call for help. Brace yourself, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost, but the human standing just outside your door. My name is Cadence. I work the closing shift at a small dive bar in the quieter part of my town. Every night feels strangely peaceful yet tense. The place is right off the highway, but the parking lot also has a back entrance that's available to the general town. Sometimes I glance at that back road, half expecting movement. It's nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where the regulars know each other by name, and the jukebox has been playing the same rotation of classic rock for years. The low hum of music and faint chatter make the silence heavier. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink. It's quiet comfort with shadows waiting underneath. Tips are surprisingly decent, and I've learned how to handle the usual bar crowd, the unpredictable, lively mix of strangers and locals, the talkers, the flirters, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone. Weekends are obviously a lot more hectic, but the thing about working during the week is that I'm expected to work my night shifts alone. No laughter, no background chatter, only the low hum of neon lights. I don't even get a bar back to pop in now and again. Yeah, it's obviously easier work and slower during the week, but I miss the company of my coworkers. That empty silence sometimes feels heavier than any noise. I tend to be pretty vigilant during my shifts because we do get the occasional bar fight, especially from restless drifters or lonely truckers after midnight. Occasional bar fight, considering the kinds of crowds we attract on these long, lonely nights. That's why I clocked the guy immediately. It was sometime after 1 in the quiet morning hours on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his late 40s, but he was extremely clean-cut and unsettlingly calm. Not the kind of looking you'd expect from a guy his age. In an area like this, he was wearing a black turtleneck underneath a perfectly pressed black trench coat. Definitely well-dressed, but casual about it. I'm not sure how to explain it, but he had this strange cold aura of sophistication about him that makes you think of money, real money, not the loud look at me kind. He glanced around slowly, before walking swiftly over to the bar and taking a seat. About him that makes you think of money. Real old-world money, not the loud look at me kind. He glanced around slowly before walking swiftly and confidently over to the bar and taking a seat. I also remember him having oddly perfect posture, but that's neither here nor there. When I walked over, he glanced at the bottles behind me and ordered something expensive and smooth without hesitation. As I was pouring his drink, he asked me if I liked working here with a calm, practiced smile on his face. It was a normal enough question, so I answered him honestly. I told him yeah and smiled back. I then made a small, nervous joke about being a bartender or something. Something lighthearted to ease the quiet tension. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe from him, but that's not the energy he was giving off. He genuinely seemed like a stand-up guy with calm confidence, kind of like the single dad at his kid's baseball game that gives the whole team a high five. He chatted with me for a bit, his tone warm and disarming, which I didn't mind since the bar was pretty quiet at that point. Eventually, he asked me if I ever thought about doing something bigger, which I admit was somewhat bizarre, a strange question that felt rehearsed. Again, though, not a totally creepy question given the nature of the situation. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy, for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, his calm expression hiding something strange beneath. seemingly disappointed at my answer, for reasons I didn't understand. After a long pause, he asked me what time I got off. Out of nowhere, that question surprised me. I hadn't picked up any kind of flirting from him whatsoever, so I was a little disappointed to discover that our conversation had just been another one of those hollow and unsettling attempts at getting my number. I smiled and gave him a vague answer, trying to stay polite but uneasy inside, brushing him off in a friendly way before turning away. I smiled in a slightly nervous but professional, friendly way without seeming uptight. Before he could answer, I busied myself and began wiping down the counter, pretending to focus on my routine. But he didn't press. He just smiled, a calm, knowing smile that felt unsettling, like he already knew something I didn't. Then he drained his drink and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, laying it carefully and deliberately on the bar like it was nothing. Then, without another word, he quietly turned, glanced once at me, and walked out into the night. I didn't really know what to make of the encounter. I know it sounds like nothing, but his demeanor was just so far off my radar that I was both confused and strangely intrigued. Either way, I figured I was never going to see him again. I thought I'd never see that mysterious stranger again, and got on with my life. But as fate would cruelly prove, I was wrong. About a week later, he came back, only this time he wasn't alone in that eerie, dim-lit bar. There was a woman with him. She drew my attention immediately since I hadn't seen her before. She looked like she was in her mid-30s and was dressed in a way that didn't quite match her age trendy, but strangely mismatched, like someone trying a little too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. I watched her closely as the two of them approached the bar. Everything about her seemed coldly calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to the way she leaned forward, acting like we were already friends. She smiled far too confidently, the kind of smile that felt forced and rehearsed, almost like she had practiced it in a mirror. She leaned against the bar in an overly familiar way, as if we were already close friends. As I was setting down napkins in front of them, the very first thing she said to me wasn't a hello or a drink order, but a compliment. She put on this bright, exaggerated smile and said, "You're so pretty." Her fingers brushed against my arm as she said it, lingering with unsettling warmth, just a second longer than normal. I laughed and thanked her, but I could instantly tell that something was off about this woman, a strange, calculated energy behind her cheerfulness. The man didn't speak, which I thought was also a little strange, given that he had been so talkative and charming during his last visit. He hadn't been so talkative last time, and that subtle change made the entire atmosphere feel uncomfortably tense and calculated. They ordered their drinks, and as I poured them, that's when questions came flooding in like a quiet interrogation. The woman asked me how long I'd been working here, along with how old I was, and a bunch of other small talk questions like that. I answered in short, polite sentences, but I got the sense that this wasn't small talk at all. She was studying me carefully, reading every reaction. At one point, she looked over at the man, and it seemed like they were communicating, despite not speaking, a silent exchange that sent chills down my spine. She looked back at me and told me that she ran an exclusive event club, her tone almost hypnotic, rehearsed, and far too confident. Club, she leaned in a bit as she said it, her eyes glinting strangely under the dim bar lights, lowering her voice as if to prevent her being overheard by another patron. She told me that she's always looking for young, fun, and attractive people for private parties, and that I'd make a killing of nearly 10 grand for a single weekend. I let out a small, forced laugh and told her it sounded way too good to be true, trying to keep my tone light but steady. She insisted that it was real and told me that a bunch of girls like me had already joined their mysterious club recently. Her smile never falls or alters at any moment, frozen and unnervingly perfect, which was starting to creep me out. She steered the conversation back to the job, circling like a predator around prey, repeating words like fun, safe, and exclusive. around the same words: fun, safe, exclusive, luxurious, and mysterious. Then, casually, she said, "You should step outside for a second. There's someone who can explain it better." My pulse kicked up instantly, a cold wave of dread rising inside me. I wasn't playing around at that point. I didn't even bother pretending like I wasn't creeped out. "I'm good," I said, firm but shaking slightly, no smile on my face this time. Just then, a group of customers walked in, laughing and talking loudly. The sudden noise felt like a miracle breaking the heavy silence. The woman's expression changed in an instant, her friendly mask slipping just slightly before she turned to the man beside her. Without another word, the two exchanged a dark glance, then quietly left the bar. Left, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't unsettled. After that, feeling an uneasy chill deep inside me, those random people had just propositioned me for God knows what. Their strange offer replayed in my head like a haunting echo. I told my coworkers and my boss about the situation, and we all agreed to keep an eye out should those people return. Everyone shared my quiet fear, though we tried to stay calm. My boss assured me that he was always a 15-minute drive away should I need him, and the bar's security cameras were typically enough to deter any misbehavior. That reassurance helped, but my nerves stayed wired every night. There wasn't really much I could do beyond that. It's not like those people had done anything illegal. The thought of their smiles still made my skin crawl. I tried to push it out of my head, but a few nights later, after closing, I saw the car. It was parked across the street, engine off, completely silent and eerily still. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being intensely watched crawled over my skin like static as I walked to my car. I kept my head down, heart pounding hard inside my chest, my keys clutched tight in my hand. When I pulled out of the lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid suspicion, but every turn I made, it was still there. I took a random turn onto a side street, and it followed another still there. Panic began to claw at my thoughts. I started freaking out, realizing this was no coincidence anymore. Internally, I knew it was them. I forced myself to stay calm and control my racing heartbeat to think clearly. Then, without hesitating, I navigated and pulled into the parking lot of a police station, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles practically turned white. The second I pulled in, that dark unmarked car sped off into the night. Nothing happened after that for a while, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over. It turned out I was right. It was a slow weekday shift, barely anyone coming in. By midnight, I was wiping down the counter, the quiet hum of the fridge, filling the silence, half thinking about closing early. When the door creaked open, it was the same woman from before, standing in the dim light like she had been waiting for me all along. I immediately and quietly sent my boss a text as inconspicuously as I possibly could. I looked back up, and the woman was staring at me with that same unnervingly perfect artificial smile. She walked slowly to the bar and sat down, with her hands folded neatly, every motion so deliberate it chilled me. I was debating just telling her to leave, when she said in that same syrupy tone, "Thought I'd come check on you." My stomach started twisting, but I did my best to hide it. I told her we were about to close and that she had to leave, but she made this exaggerated pouty face, her eyes never blinking, and asked for just one old-fashioned. I thought about denying her, but something deep inside warned me not to make her angry. But I figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive, so I turned around and got started trying to keep my cool. And then I heard it, the soft, eerie, and unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was completely gone without a sound. I felt this awful pit in my stomach as I stepped toward the entrance. Through the glass, I saw it, a black van idling silently in the empty lot just outside. Without thinking, I locked the door as quickly as I could, but then came the sudden metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I instinctively panicked and grabbed the heaviest thing I could, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon, while my hands trembled uncontrollably as I dialed 911 with my other hand. There was no way the police would get there in time, so I thought about making a run for it out the front door, but I didn't. Every heartbeat felt like thunder as I braced myself for a fight. When I saw headlights pulling into the lot, it was my boss. The sounds on the back door suddenly stopped, and a few seconds later, the black van screeched, violently pulling out of the lot with a roar. I embraced my boss and told him what had happened, and he said he had managed to catch the van's license plate number as it sped away into the night. Gotten the license plate of the van as it was leaving. When the cops arrived, my boss reviewed the security footage with them. It was worse than I had imagined. Far more terrifying than any nightmare before. Just before the woman left, the cameras had captured two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting silently in perfect coordination. Under the flickering light, there was another person in the back who was banging on the door with his fist clearly trying to flush me out to the front, as if they had rehearsed this chilling trap together. It was downright horrifying. To make matters worse, the plate number my boss had caught turned out to be unregistered, a ghost vehicle belonging to absolutely no one. It's been quite a while since this incident, but no progress has been made. The only good news to come out of the whole thing is that my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore, which honestly brings me some fragile comfort. Despite that, I'm still extremely uneasy. Anytime I'm scheduled for a night shift, the silence feels heavier than before. I still question how they knew I'd be working alone. That question keeps echoing in my mind. It doesn't make any sense. Even now, I often think about what would have happened if I had panicked completely and run outside that night had I given into fear and run out the front door. Because after what happened to me a few months ago, I'll never again work a lonely night shift. It's a small gas station, the kind that barely gets any business once it gets late. Most of my shift was spent quietly restocking dusty shelves, wiping down counters, and occasionally ringing up a trucker or traveler passing through. I remember the whole thing vividly. It was just past 2:30 in the morning, the air outside cold and completely still. By then, even the truckers had mostly dried up, and I was left with basically nothing to do. The silence was so heavy it felt alive. I scrolled mindlessly on my phone, trying to kill some time, at one point stepping outside for air under the flickering neon sign. I stepped outside for some fresh, freezing air, rubbing my hands together against the cold. I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear in the cold night's misty silence. The parking lot was empty, just the pumps, the road, and the dark, motionless stretch of trees beyond. The neon sign flickered, faintly buzzing in the quiet emptiness, and I remember it being hazy out, like you could literally see the moisture in the air. Even with the highway not too far off, it was eerily silent, like time had stopped. Right as I was about to walk back towards the store, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I whipped my head around and realized I wasn't alone out there after all. There was a person suddenly standing motionless behind one of the dimly lit pumps. How had I not noticed him earlier? He was wearing a dark red hoodie, rain-soaked from the cold night, with the hood up and both hands shoved deep into his pockets. There wasn't a car in sight, so he obviously wasn't fueling up. The only thing was, he didn't seem to be heading toward the store either. He was just standing there, half turned toward the glowing storefront, like he was watching me in absolute silence. At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about the way he moved under the flickering neon light rubbed me the wrong way. He was shifting his weight slowly, almost circling, as if testing how close he could get without being noticed. He was kind of shuffling about in this strange, uneasy, circular pattern, pacing like he couldn't decide what to do. I entered the store, but made sure to keep an eye on him through the thick, reflective glass window. I kept track of him while pretending not to, hoping desperately someone would drive up soon and pick him up or distract him somehow. But after a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slow at first, then suddenly faster, as if something had finally snapped inside him, pushing inside like he made up his mind all at once. He walked up to the counter but didn't say anything right away, just stared at me with a cold, calculating expression like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered a few quick words that made my heart race. He said with oddly steady calmness that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He claimed he needed a jump, or maybe just a little gas, to get to the next town. I was literally shocked he wasn't even trying to make his story believable. Like, I couldn't believe he actually expected me to buy his obvious, suspicious, and poorly rehearsed story. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, no, he said, too quick, shaking his head. He insisted he just needed a flashlight, maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off. That much was true. His eyes tracked every movement I made, the way he spoke, the way he watched my reaction. It felt like a test. To be fair though, people walking into gas stations at that hour are usually a little strange, but this one felt entirely different, like he was waiting for a signal to act. Though people walking into gas stations at that hour are usually a little strange, I started wondering whether he actually needed help and was just an odd person or someone acting under something deeply unsettling. I asked him where his car was parked, and he told me it was just beyond the highway entrance. I was obviously skeptical, but then he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned to look at the screen, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked out there, its silhouette faintly glowing under the flickering neon lights. For a second, a cold wave of doubt passed through me. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help. And that's when it hit me, a sudden realization colder than the midnight air. I had just stepped outside moments earlier, and I would have remembered a car parked out there. I glanced back at the monitor and saw the slightest movement near the car's back bumper, someone crouching, silently, almost hidden just out of view. A cold wave of dread hit me, spreading like ice through my chest. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help the guy, pretending everything was normal and calm, but not before telling him I needed to grab my phone from the back office. I turned slowly, not wanting to spook him, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. But the second I was out of his direct sight, I slammed my hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, piercing the silence like a scream. Screeching through the store, I expected him to attack me, but what he did instead was even more unsettling. His nervous energy disappeared, no more fake urgency, no more shifting from foot to foot. He actually relaxed. His whole body language changed completely. And then he smiled, not a panic smile, not an embarrassed one either, but a slow, chilling, knowing grin, like he had all the time in the world, like this was amusing to him. I was in shock, frozen in complete disbelief and fear. I didn't even have time to react or get physical with him. In one fluid motion, he turned and bolted. I ran to the monitors just in time to see two dark figures racing fast into the woods. Both of them suddenly take off fast, disappearing not toward the car, but instead into the thick, silent woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine completely off, headlights dimmed, no one inside. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I saw it. The car was still there, but the men were gone, vanished without a trace or sound. No footprints leading away, no tire marks, no broken branches, no sign of them anywhere. And then one of the officers pointed something out, something I hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third hidden person waiting inside the whole time. The police took my statement down. I turned over the surveillance footage, and the realization froze me completely in fear. That was that. A few days later, they followed up with me. They had the car towed and ran the plates. It turned out it had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier from a remote town more than 100 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it, no missing persons reports, no clues, nothing at all. There were no other crimes linked to it, just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. Even months later, the silence was deeply unsettling. That was months ago, and still nothing. I don't know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but after that terrifying night, my nerves never truly healed. I can say for sure that I will never work another night shift again. This happened a couple of extremely unsettling weeks ago. I worked the night shift at Walmart. It's not the worst job in the world, but after a while, it starts to feel like you're just floating endlessly through quiet time. The nights blend together. Same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of the overhead lights. Hopefully something different and better eventually comes along. I usually hang out in and stock the electronics section, which is nice because it's quieter. Then the other areas, people don't exactly come rushing in at 2 o'clock in the lonely morning to buy phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most of the customers are either night owls killing time or truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before heading back on the road. That's why I noticed him at first. I didn't think much of it, just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up, he was lingering nearby, hovering in the next over, or standing a little too still by the glowing aisle lights. The clearance section, he wasn't looking at anything. He was just standing there watching me silently under those harsh lights. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is big and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice, never once pretending to actually shop it, set something deep in my gut on edge. I was waiting for him to just get on with it and ask for my number, but he never approached me. His presence felt like an invisible trap, tightening. It was like he wanted me to see him, which didn't make any sense to me. I went to radio someone about it, but realized that the batteries had died hours ago, leaving me completely alone. My old static-filled radio must have been completely dead, because it wasn't working. Eventually, I started debating whether I should go find a manager, when I suddenly felt an unexpected cold hand firmly wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react, a woman's voice rang out loud, cheerful and unnaturally confident, overly familiar. She exclaimed, "There you are," with exaggerated relief, before going on a little spiel about how she had been looking all over for me. I turned completely thrown off and saw a woman I had never seen before in my entire life, smiling with a grip firm on my arm, like we were lifelong old friends from another world. Reuniting. Before I could say anything, the stranger's sudden grip tightened with strange urgency. She leaned in and whispered, her tone dropping to something low and urgent. "That guy's been recording. You follow me now." My stomach dropped, my heartbeat thundered beneath the quiet fluorescent lights. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back. The man was still there, only now he wasn't even pretending to browse. He was staring right at me. A cold wave of fear crept over me. I let her pull me. I didn't even question it. The way she grabbed my arm, her loud casual tone masking real panic. The way she spoke so loud and casually, like we were two old friends reuniting. I clung to it. I was beyond grateful that someone had noticed the danger and acted fast, saving me from that unbearable silent terror. Someone had realized what was going on and bravely stepped in to protect me. She kept up the act as we walked, talking nonstop with convincing friendliness, rambling about something, maybe a trip she had taken, maybe an inside joke we supposedly shared. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were trapped in a spiral of panic stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? That was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was still following us, but I couldn't muster the courage to turn around just yet. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving quickly and confidently. I barely noticed where we were going, only that the distance between me and that man was growing. We kept walking briskly through the dim aisles, only that we were going that the distance between me and that man was growing. In all honesty, I was kind of expecting her to suddenly drop the act of pretending to know me at some point, but she kept it up. At one point, it was getting a little uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me, and to my relief, that man was no longer following. The flickering lights overhead made everything surreal. The woman kept pulling me forward, though I told her that we were good now, and that we should probably go find my manager, but she just squeezed my arm tighter, telling me that he was lurking somewhere. My pulse quickened suspicion, slowly taking over fear. I thought to myself, so what? What's he going to do in a large, dimly lit store full of employees? I was obviously worried at first because no one was around, but now that I wasn't alone, I started realizing that there wasn't much of a point at being scared anymore. I told her this, but she continued moving. I told her I was serious and planted my feet firmly against the polished floor, twisting my arm slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said, but she didn't. She smiled at me, but something in it was off. "Come on. Just a little further," she said, basically tugging my arm with strange insistence. At that point, glanced around. The store was basically dead quiet. We had moved past the registers, past the self-checkout, past the aisles that saw the most foot traffic. The dimly humming warehouse section loomed ahead, nearly empty cold air drifting from the vents. Beyond that was the side exit without security cameras, the one employees used for loading shipments late at night. That's when it suddenly dawned on me. With chilling clarity, she was leading me straight to the exit. I didn't think. I screamed for help as I yanked my arm free of her grasp with all my might. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull free. I didn't waste another second, heart pounding echoing through the empty aisles. I turned and ran toward the front of the store. As I fled through the dimly lit store, she yelled out something behind me. She yelled for me to come back, followed by my name, which I hadn't given her. That chilling realization froze my blood instantly. I kept running until I saw one of my coworkers, who was running toward me, most likely reacting to my screaming. I told them to call security, which he promptly did. The panic in my voice was still shaking. That woman was long gone, though. By the time I told my story to the security guards, that woman and that man were nowhere in sight. The silence that followed felt almost unreal. They reviewed the security footage, and just as I suspected, the woman and man walked into the store together. She had been with him from the very beginning, plotting every single step. With him the entire time, the man's face was clear as day in one of the frames, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the true manipulative mastermind behind everything that night, so I was infuriated that the cameras hadn't picked her face up. Every second of it had been so carefully planned and terrifyingly organized. The police got involved, and the whole thing went down as a failed abduction attempt. I'm still waiting for a resolution about it. That man should definitely be easy to track down after such a bold crime, given his face was caught on camera. I have no idea how that woman knew my full name, my shift hours, and my fears. Name, that's what terrifies me the most. That deep, chilling realization of being hunted. Those people hadn't just picked me at random. Every step, every word, every fake smile had been planned. I was a direct target. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. If you'd like to share your own story to be featured in an upcoming video, please email me at nighthorrorstoriesYus@gmail.com. Every story has the power to touch someone's heart, and who knows, maybe your story will be the next one told. Send it in today, and let's share unforgettable moments together.